Okay, well, good afternoon, all. I'm sure people will still continue to join us in the next coming minutes. We're going to kick off now. Welcome to TUC Organise 2020. This is the first day of a three-day long event where the union movement is coming together to discuss the way forward for organising, building union membership and building power in our workplaces. My name is Shelly Asquith. I'm the Health and Safety Policy Officer at the TUC, and I'm going to be chairing this discussion. We've got just 1 hour running up until 3 p.m. and we'll be hearing from 3 speakers before having a chance to have a bit of a discussion and answering some questions. So the union health and safety agenda in the last few months has been crucial in defending workers' rights and saving lives from coronavirus exposure. It has always been one of the most important roles in trade unionism. And we know that workplaces with health and safety reps have less chance of work-related illness, injury and death. As we look to build union power, health and safety can also be a gateway to broader workplace organising, especially if campaigns engage members and inspire action. Often it's the health and safety issues that get workers into the union and get them active before going on to becoming involved in demands over pay and other conditions. So this short session is about sharing some creative, assertive ideas for organising on health and safety, engaging and empowering members by doing things a bit differently, including maximising the use of social media, also kind of get attention, buy-in and victories. So I'm really pleased to be joined by 3 fantastic veteran trade union activists who've done some impressive organising on health and safety, not just over the last few months, but over years. They're each going to present on some of the workplace organising that they've been involved with, and then we'll have a chance for some discussion and questions. They've all been told how long they've got to speak, so just a warning to you that I may well interrupt you if you do go over time. Our first contribution is from someone who is an organiser, an educator, a writer, the author of the book Blacklisted, which tells the story of blacklisting in the construction industry. Most recently, he's been involved in the Shut the Sites campaign to close construction sites and protect workers from coronavirus exposure. It's Dave Smith. Dave, the screen is yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shelley, and thanks for everyone to come along and watch. I'm seeing some of the names in the chat line. It's nice for you to come and watch us lot when there's general secretaries and the like speaking in other no general secretaries in this workshop. So look, I'll start off with saying this. Our starting point as union safety people is that we want to keep workers safe and healthy, and we want to keep their families safe and healthy. You know, that's our beginning point for all of this. And every single one of us, given the choice, would love to work in a workplace where there's, you know, the management took notice of what we said, consulted with the workforce. When we made suggestions to them, that actually were common sense and would quite clearly save people's lives, and they'd actually implement them. Of course, we'd like that. And if you happen to work in a place like that, you know, good luck to you. Of course, over many years of being a safety rep in the building industry, of being a TUC tutor, and also writing for Hazards magazine, which I can only plug that every single safety rep in the country should be buying Hazards magazine. What I can only stress is that, of course, most employers are not like that at all, and most employers, far from, you know, bending over backwards to work with the unions, a lot of them, in fact, their main concern is what's the legal minimum I have to do to comply with a law, and secondly, the other question they ask all the time is how much money is it going to cost, you know, because we can't get away from the fact that even though everyone talks about health and safety isn't some special little, doesn't sit in this special sort of, you know, closeted bubble on its own. You know, if there's funding issues, if there's tight budgets, if there's deadlines and targets to it, then that absolutely overlaps into what's going on in health and safety, irrespective of what the you know, the publicity and the spin of some of the employers will say. And so there are times when we have to push the employer a bit more than they want to give. So there's sometimes at this stage, union safety reps sometimes have this idea that, oh, what we do is we need to quote the law at the employer. That if we talk about the Health and Safety at Work Act, if we talk about the Employment Right Relations Act, if we talk about the Brown Book, the SRSC regs, the law will be on our side, and the law will push the employer into where we want to get them. And of course, where the law is useful, we should use the law. But let's be honest, the law is not going to save health and safety and save lives. People often say to me, "Oh, can the employer do this? Can the employer do that?" As if the law, the answer is always the same. The employer can do anything they can get away with. If they do it and no one complains about it, if they do it and no one makes a fuss about it, they've done it and they've implemented it, irrespective of what the law says. So yes, if the law is on our side, we should be aware of it and use it. But our real strength comes from our workers. The real strength of the trade union is getting the workers to stick together. Union safety reps get a bad name sometimes in the press, as if we're like anoraks who walk around with clipboards trying to police. But I'm not an anorak, I'm a union organiser. Our strength is about getting workers to stick together. This is about a power relationship in the workplace. And in most workplaces, in the current economic climate, that management, have the sort of whip hand when it comes to power relationships. And if you're just one safety rep relying on quoting a bit of legislation, then they're always going to be able to sort of nudge you out the way and ignore you. What they can't ignore is when we're able to mobilise people, when we get people to be on our side, when we get the workers to demonstrate and clearly demonstrate to the employers that it's not just one union safety reps doing it, it's the workforce are outraged about the way they're being treated and that kind of stuff. So for me, being a safety rep is about being a union organiser. It just happens to be that health and safety is the issue that we're organising around. And I write a regular column in Hazards magazine, which is called Organising 101, which there'll be a link that we can stick up. Either I'll put it up or Shelly will put it up a bit later, which is basically about giving people tips, giving people ideas, giving people suggestions of stuff that I've done over the years, or reps on training courses have told me and explained to me. And it goes from relatively simple low-level stuff. One of my favourite examples was once when a safety rep was talking about one of their members was going to be sacked for because of sickness absence. And the sickness absence was because of something that they picked up in the workplace, and the union had quoted the Equality Act and reasonable adjustments all the time. But the employer was pretty much on the last stage of just about to sack the worker. And what the safety rep did is the safety rep went over to the card shop and bought just some massive giant card, get well soon card, that's about the size of a big Valentine's card that your love struck son buys his first ever girlfriend, and basically went around to all of the workers that the person worked with and said, hey, look, do you know that they're going to sack this worker that has worked with us for years? Please sign this. Got 50, 60 people to sign it. And then on the day of the meeting where it was going to be a sickness absence, where the worker was going to be sacked, they didn't just have the card, they got the 50 people to all turn up outside the meeting. So the manager, when the manager's turning up, that was going to end up being the person who's going to be disciplined, basically the union rep presents this giant card, presents a bunch of flowers, and each individual worker comes up and gives the person who's going to be sacked a bit of a cuddle. And look, the manager is going to make the sacking. Has basically got to sit there for 5 minutes seeing this sort of demonstration of solidarity that the union has done by literally doing a whip round and getting a card. If we could have sent an email, it wouldn't have had the same effect. It's the actual giving people the opportunity to demonstrate their support for us that we need to do. And this is the same whether it's in lockdown or whether it's not in lockdown. With coronavirus, we're doing things slightly differently. So of course we've got to use the video technology and the social media much more than we ever had before. Nowadays, literally, I wouldn't do any kind of mobilisation, any kind of event, without making sure that we've got someone filming it. You know, we're going to film it, someone's going to edit it, and we are going to punt it out on social media, because it comes back to that power balance thing again. One worker on their own can be ignored. If we bring all the workers together, it's the same number of workers, but if you bring them all together, that's the reason we use the clenched fist, because one worker at a time can all be snapped. If we bring all the workers together, you can't break the clenched fist. And that's what we're doing by trying to mobilise and getting people to stick together. I've only got so much time. Shelly's going to tell me off in a minute. So, whether it starts off with, doing giant cards and getting people to do stuff. If you read the rest of the stuff, there's bigger and alternative suggestions in there. But what we need to be clear about is we're not going to win the employer over by a moral argument. We're not going to win the employer over just by quoting a piece of legislation. We need to demonstrate that the workforce are on our side and the workforce are prepared to do something about it. That's what being a safety rep's about. And in the Q&A later on, potentially we can have a discussion on some of these other things. Thank you very much. I think I've done my 8 minutes. You're muted, Shelley. I can't hear you.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Good job that you weren't muted. Thanks so much for that. And hopefully people will have seen in the chat box on the right-hand side that myself and Hilda from Hazard's campaign have posted links to your brilliant Organising 101 column in Hazard's magazine. Do have a look at that. It's got the example of the giant card, but it's also got a lot of other practical examples of ways that people have taken action over health and safety in the past. Before I introduce our next speaker, I'm just going to share my screen and show you a quick video. Here we go. Can you see that, guys? Excellent.
Go back to school. Until it's safe. 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 Go back to school. Until it's safe.
Okay, now he'll be able to talk us through what was going on in that video and how they went about organising it. But now I think I'm right in saying this, but our next speaker is not a health and safety rep, but is a branch treasurer on full-time facilities. And like most other union reps over the last few months, has found himself having to organise over health and safety as, of course, coronavirus has become the biggest workplace issue affecting our members. He represents local government workers in Salford and is chair of Unison's North West Black Workers Committee. Introducing Ameen. You should have the ability to speak now, Ameen.
Brilliant. Thank you for the invitation, and welcome to all those that have tuned in. Yeah, I'm someone who's been a rep in local government since 1988, and I must admit I've gone on various health and safety courses over the years, but it's never been a particularly pressing issue, mainly for clerical members that I've represented over too many years. But obviously, the situation with the virus means that you can really tear up whatever man you read before about things you have to deal with in the workplace. This pandemic has really brought a lot of attention through what you need to do to be able to organise. If you're interested in organising members, I've got to say that the last few months has been an experience that I've never had before, on a scale I've never had before, with a level of engagement with members that I've never experienced before on this sort of scale. And that feels strange to say that when I'm sat in my front room using a pace table as a desk, looking at my front street. It feels very strange to even to say that sort of organising is possible in this sort of way. I have got out occasionally, as you can see from the video, but most of the time I've been sat in here doing that sort of thing. I think the first thing to say, obviously, is that the whole issue around the original lockdown created a huge level of engagement with the union for us in my union branch in Salford. Obviously, we all know now how late the government were in instituting the lockdown. The full strategy of herd immunity, effectively, we don't care how many die, as long as we can keep business going, very soon hit the buffers, but not before it was too late to stop the fact that we now suffer from one of the worst death rate in Europe. And obviously, your first duty is to make sure that your members have the right information and feel protected. And the process, I suppose, has been interesting for us because clearly people weren't happy even before Johnson did his U-turn about the levels of safety in the workplace and what the government was saying, and it created a huge amount of discussion among members about what should be done safely. And I've got to say that the impact of it is that in sections where within our branch where we've tried to organise over a number of years and not had a rep and had struggled to get union representation to deal with some very big issues in terms of people's work under austerity, because everyone in local government in the last 10 years has been asked to do a lot more with a lot less resource, with a lot less staff, often for a lot less money. I think our real pay in real terms in local government is somewhere in the region of 23% we've lost in real terms in the last 10 years, as well as that extra work and that extra stress and anxiety that goes with dealing with austerity, where our members are dealing with people who, more and more clients who are more and more vulnerable and more complexity to their lives caused by austerity. So that's been the picture, and in certain areas it's been a struggle. And what's been interesting is how some of those areas have responded. So areas where they've been concerned working in a building that social distancing wasn't being maintained, couldn't be maintained safely with their client group, that for the first time they've raised that demand with their management. They've gone to them and said this isn't suitable, and then once they've dealt with the fact that people should be working from home, they've gone on to organise themselves, elect a rep, and have regular union meetings through Zoom or have you since then. And that's just not happened in one workplace in our local authority, that's happened in numerous. We got a Zoom package earlier on. It was limited to 100, and we found out very quickly in our first mass meeting that we had at that time that we had to lock out probably about 30 or 40 people that couldn't even get into our union meeting to discuss what was going on. So we've had a huge response over that initial few weeks of uncertainty, and they wanted to make sure that they were safe. And the message we gave them is that the only people that know how to do their jobs and know how to do their jobs safely are the workers themselves. And therefore they need to be set the stage in saying, these are the things we need to do. This is what needs to be done as an emergency. This is what needs to be done to safeguard our clients. But this is how we can work virtually. And anything that didn't need to be done face-to-face needs to be done virtually. And we wanted to give them as much ownership of that as possible. And then us as a union branch, not just myself but others, supported those members to put those demands to management and to HR and say, that's what we're willing to do. This is the way we're willing to work. And we're not willing to accept anything else with that regard. And so we had a huge level of involvement and a huge level of recruitment and reps during this pandemic. The bit about the video, I think the next major challenge we had was around the attempt to ease the lockdown, first and foremost in schools. And obviously they're not on a speaker on this platform, but I have to pay tribute to the NEU and the stance they took in putting forward the demand that there was no return to just full school for schools unless certain safety tests, the 5 tests that they suggested were met. And I think that they were very powerful in the way they put that forward, both through the use of social media and in terms of the way that they mobilised their own members. And both those things that made it a lot easier for us in our branch to do similar, because we represent over 1,000 support staff in the Salford area, in every primary school and secondary school in Salford. And as part of our campaign, we got more and more confident at trying to use those you call them stunts or social media or whatever how you want to describe it. On International Workers' Day, we had an event where we did something with the council, but we also did something where we went to the local hospital. We stood outside with them in a socially distanced protest. And it was interesting that the media at that time were looking for stories, looking for ways of engaging in. And I think that Salford Royal protest made the front page of that Manchester Evening News on International Workers' Memorial Day. And we kind of taken that tactic again, as you can see with the little protest we had outside the town hall over schools, when we felt the local authority were potentially moving too fast to open up years 1 reception and year 6 in schools. And again, it's a symbolic thing, but it meant that actually it made it clear the stance we took. It involved that it got widely shared in the media. It was used to help build a meeting we had later that evening with Rebecca Long-Bailey, our local MP, about the safety in schools issue. And it was definitely a thing that a lot of our members engaged in and supported and took part in the event. So it made a difference to us building our side around schools. I mean, one of the things that happened in one of our schools, off the back of that, when they were saying it was safe to return at the start of in June, some of our members in one particular primary school were concerned that if they opened up all the year groups at the same time, the risk assessment wasn't right. In particular, they were particularly concerned about BAME staff and BAME children in the school taking that virus back to their parents potentially if there weren't more safety measures in place. And you know, this wasn't by direction by the branch or of any way involved by us directly about it. The rep got the messages that we sent through the campaign and got a message to say that we support anyone that felt that they couldn't go in if they didn't feel it was safe. And she organised a meeting of members on the gate at 8 in the morning on a Monday morning, or a bit earlier than 8. And 20 of them then, over 20 of them then decided that it wasn't safe for them to go into work. They eventually did go back into work 3-4 days later. And they went back in after the risk assessment was amended to take into consideration the points they'd raised and wanted to achieve. So it led to some real action, and it led to a bigger debate among the rest of our schools in Salford about making sure that union members had the power to make sure that they did things that were safe. And it was an inspiration to us in the branch, as well as it supported the arguments we were putting forward with the local authority and others. So, you know, there is always strength in being able to use these tactics of stunts, of social media and all these things at the moment. But ultimately, we keep having to go back to the fact that our members are the ones that do the job. They're the essential workers. They're the ones that deliver service. And therefore, they should be the ones to decide what's safe for them to do and what isn't safe and how it should be done. And we want them to exert that power over other elements of their working life. We want them to take that message into other things that we do as a union, because we want to build a stronger union to be able to defend our members, to fight for our pay, to make sure that we don't become the people that have to pay the cost of the Tory plans. We're not going to go back to austerity like we did before. We don't want to be paying that price ourselves this time round. And we want to make sure that our union plays its part in making sure that there's a wider response from the trade union movement that says that actually we're willing to organise to protect our members in the long term. I think that unions have had a far higher profile over the pandemic than we've had in years. Probably most of my years as being a union rep. And I think that's something we need to capitalise on. Thousands of people are joining trade unions. We have to be able to organise them and make sure that they are ready to defend our members' terms and conditions, their pay, and make sure that our jobs, because all those challenges are yet to come. And health and safety still, it will be a key debate around the return to schools in September, but it will be a key debate as the lockdown eases. See, it's quite confusing messages from the government. They were slow on lockdown. They're very quick to ease lockdown, not because they're concerned about our health and well-being stuck at home or anything else, or children's education. They're worried about profits for big business, not about us. And ultimately, we have to make sure that our members have a voice and make sure that if they are introduced into doing things that they were not done during COVID, that it's done safely and they have some control over how that's done, and to make sure that the needs and the safety of our members and the services they provide come before the ideas of making profits for the business class. So I'll leave it there, and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ameen. I have to absolutely agree on what you said there about capitalising this growth in visibility of unions, and we know that there's been over 90,000 more people joining trade unions in the last year. We can't settle for them simply being union members. We need to turn them into activists and organisers. Just want to share some of the nice comments that have come in on the chat. Tracy from PCS said, safety reps have really come to the fore. We're seeing lots of new reps coming through interested in health and safety. So it's great to hear about promoting it more as an organising role. We're finding in PCS having regular reps discussions and building confidence. It's good advert for the movement, very good education organising on health and safety, solidarity. George said Unison has more and more people coming through to become health and safety reps as well. Steve says, hear for the NEU's victory. Dave agrees 100% with Ameen. All the education unions have really done great organising. And Ryan said the strength of the NEU and the GMB and Unison and Unite coming together on health and safety has had a great impact. So solidarity to all the education unions and to all of our attendees from all the different unions. Finally, our next speaker is someone whose activity on social media in particular I've really admired in promoting health and safety campaigns. And in particular over the last few months as coronavirus became such a devastating hazard among key workers, and we saw a tragic number of bus drivers, especially in London, passing away after catching the virus. He's a bus driver himself. He's a health and safety rep with Unite, and he's been organising members to secure safe working and taking the Mayor of London and Transport for London to task over not acting swiftly enough. It's Moe Manir. Over to you, Mo.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for everyone coming through. And Shelly, thank you for allowing me to come and speak and talk about social media. So just wanted to talk about more about how we've been organising using a Facebook group, Facebook pages, WhatsApps, how effective they've been. During this lockdown, what's happened is a lot of our workers, members, bus drivers, were generally on the buses, so we're hardly able to speak, and obviously social distancing in the garages is limited. So in terms of communication was a problem for us workers trying to get the message across, finding out what the situation is. So we realized our Facebook group started to have lots of members tune in. In the beginning, in January, end of February, we had 3,200 already in the Facebook groups that we set up for. It's been about a year now since we set it up. We've got that many bus drivers in a private group. There's about 20 administrators, bus drivers. We don't normally allow managers, obviously, to enter these kind of groups. We filter, we vet what happens there. So we've obviously realized that the virus is coming through, and we felt that we're not protected. The sanitizers were not provided in time, gloves. We also realized that the cabs were not properly sealed off. So what the drivers were doing were they were sealing it off themselves using sellotape or cling film with the speaker holes in the cab, the bus cabin, to prevent the virus from coming through. And one worker started to do that, and then another worker started to follow suit. And what we thought, we need to make that transparent to other workers, that we're going to take control of our workplaces. We're going to start implementing our own DIY. We couldn't rely on the employer to implement it. Obviously, that demand was there to the employers that they need to be doing things. So we've obviously contacted our regional officers to write to TfL to say, look, implement a proper professional fitted perspex screen to cover the speaker holes, which took about 2 weeks to roll it out across London buses in the initial part of lockdown. But the fact that the drivers were doing this by themselves was, I think, and I believe that it was courageous actions. The next courageous action the driver started to do was to seal off the nearest 2 seats by the bus cabs. And those pictures were in later on end of this, when I finish talking, you'll see a video anyway, what I mean by it, so you can get an understanding what happened. The 2 seats nearest to the cabs, we sealed it off ourselves. We didn't have tape, so I think one driver started to use the ticket roll and wrap it around the 2 seats and the hand poles. And even some drivers put in messages in, please do not sit here for our safety. And that started to go onto social media, and people started to think, oh, well, I'll do that as well in my cab tomorrow. We did have employers threatening, putting messages out that if they do these kind of things, that they will face disciplinary action. We were kept on carrying on what we were doing. We also had some drivers, including myself. We obviously had media attention, and sadly we lost during that time 5 bus drivers by that time. And obviously at that time, the media and the employers, media was more interested to find out the stories, what's happening. The employers were thinking, okay, well, we can't carry out disciplinary action because that's their culture of having disciplinary action, taking control of the workplaces and their behaviors. So it's just historic in the buses that they try to control using disciplinary methods. But it's also exposed in the buses where we were taking pictures of the cabs not being cleaned for many, many years. And Transport for London, which caused a bit of controversy, they said we're doing enhanced cleaning regime now, because those pictures were going out on Twitter, on social media, and people wanted to know, the public had some interest, what's going on the buses, why are bus drivers dying? And we've exposed that the private for-profit bus industry in London buses, they were too focused on making profits and ignoring health and safety for so long since privatization of buses. The priorities of the welfare of the bus drivers, negligence was exposed. So that's why they had to make sure that they also come out on media and say, well, we're doing this. Bus drivers were cantering and said, well, it's not happening. This is the bus I was driving today. It's not happening. So it was courageous actions by the drivers, but also safety reps crucially sharing it out on behalf of the members as well on social media. We had, by that time, I think, 1,000, during the pandemic, we had 1,000 bus drivers join in on the Facebook group, and on our Twitters, we had lots of drivers start to sign up into Twitter using alias names as a bus driver, different names, and sharing pictures showing that this is what's going on, because the employers were denying that. They were saying, oh, well, we're doing our best, well, we're cleaning the toilets, we're cleaning the facilities, we're cleaning the cabs. These things we were exposing, that they were not taking action on the workplaces, making sure. At one point where the employers started to do is, which was good, they said they encouraged the drivers not to take any buses out if they were dirty in the morning. So we forced them to implement a procedure in place, encouraging drivers. That was not the case pre-COVID-19. That's now the case. They also, where drivers were falling off sick, and some drivers were not receiving sick pay. So the drivers came forward showing the letter saying, I've got a medical condition, I can't come into work, I need to be shielding. And the employer wrote saying, well, you can't, the company contractual sick pay arrangement is that you have to wait 5 years before you receive company sick pay. So the driver was like sharing these 2 letters, one from his doctor, one from his employer, on Twitter. He grabbed attention of, I think, a money saving expert, I can't remember his name, Martin, I think, who intervened And then the employer backed down, and all transport companies, what they did was they started to implement sick pay from day one, only for an exceptional period for COVID-19. That shouldn't be the case. Martin Lewis, thanks, Kerry. So these things shouldn't be the case. These safety critical bus drivers should receive sick pay from day one. That's not the case pre-COVID-19, and I don't think that's going to be the case post-COVID-19. Already we're seeing where workers are returning back from holiday who are in quarantine, not receiving company sick pay. So it's just an example. If I relate it to, if it was a pilot, if a passenger was to find out that the pilot was not receiving company sick pay and was forced to come back to work, how would that passenger feel? So same way we say that the bus driver as a safety critical worker, as well as a tube driver who does also get company sick pay, a bus driver should receive company sick pay. So those great works that we eventually at one point where bus drivers started, well, because unfortunately we lost around about 30 bus drivers, but by the time we had about 15, we were pressing for the front doors of the buses to be closed down. Some of the bus drivers started doing this themselves because we didn't feel the safety measure that we were doing was enough. And Transport for London didn't say, which is the body above the private companies, didn't admit that it was got to do with revenue, why they didn't want to implement the safety measures. They said that they want to do a trial on one of the bus depots. Coincidentally, that was my bus depot. And we said that we shouldn't be using trials during a health emergency when bus drivers are dying. We need to have the front doors closed. So we're running a campaign with hashtag seal off the front doors on Twitter and Facebook. And again, coming back on radios as well. Some drivers went on LBC radio saying close off the front doors. Eventually, we got all buses that we can close the front doors off. We managed to close through. So that was. We also received, by the way, that time, one of the companies which threatened as well, if you seal off the front doors without being a procedure or before becoming an official safety measure, that the drivers will face disciplinary action. That also went on Twitter. The management then withdrew that letter from the employee, the manager that put it through. They withdrew it from the company because they came under pressure from Greater London Authority Assembly members who also wrote to Sadiq Khan, who's the chair of TfL, that these safety measures need to come through, and the fact that employers in the midst of pandemic, they're writing disciplinary letters is that the way the industry been all this time, that any time that the employees want to stand up for safety or fight for safety, that they straight away jump on the bandwagon to discipline the bus driver. In terms of risk assessments, I noticed what happened was a lot of employees, by the way, didn't know about Section 44, didn't know about, don't know what section risk assessments are and stuffs. Health and safety reps, obviously, if they want in the course, they would know this. But generally, we didn't go into social media to talk about risk assessments. What I do know, just for the attendees, what we do know is that the employers were relying on Transport for London, the body, to thanks, Shelly, I got that message. They wanted to allow a generalized risk assessment carried out by Transport for London. We disagree to say it should be directly the employer, not Transport for London. So what they ended up doing is to do a draft template, which we think is wrong. I think I've come on, I've got to cut through now. Watch the video and hopefully you can understand what's been taking place and what's been going on. And I'd like to thank also Lynn Ferguson, who's my tutor, who's already was my tutor in for Unite in the courses. She's participating, and the great work that I've been doing is I have to thank her for all the stuff that she's taught me in my courses. Thank you.
That's nice to hear. Thank you so much, Mo. I'm just going to play that video now that you kindly made for us. There we go. Wow. Nice one. I think that's really good in just illustrating exactly what you guys had to do. And it's obviously absolutely disgraceful that so much of that stuff was DIY, but clearly it's really helped engage people and build stronger branches in the union. That example of showing how dirty the workstations are reminds me of one of the other examples in Dave's Organising 101, where they did an experiment around hot desking, with, I think, sending off samples of dirty hot desks to a lab and in a petri dish, and showing how disgusting these kind of working environments where shared spaces are, not even during a pandemic but in normal times. I've got, right, moving on to questions now, because we've only got about 15 minutes, and I can't not ask you all about section 44, because there's been about 4 or 5 questions that have come in now, either relating to section 44 explicitly or talking about the general rights to refuse to go back to the workplace for those colleagues who are still not going back to work. So if I can ask you guys about that, and then another question that I'm going to group, because there's been a few that have come in around colleagues with underlying health conditions, risk assessments that relate to people with particular vulnerabilities, including illnesses, disability, Black members of staff. How do we go about negotiating for specific individualised risk assessments as well as risk assessments for the whole workplace? There's a couple of questions there around risk assessments, underlying health conditions, and refusing to go back into the workplace. Can I ask one of you to come in on that to start off with? Dave, I'm going to go to you because you've been quite active in the Q&A function already. You've already got some answers up your sleeve.
I'll take the section 44 bit. For people who are not aware of it, there's a piece of legislation called the Employment I'm trying to think, Employment Rights Act, Employment Relations Act 1996, and section 44 basically says that it's unlawful for the employer to victimise you if you refuse to if you think a workplace is unsafe, you're within your rights to take yourself away from that workplace, and you shouldn't be victimised by your employer. It's a fairly strong piece of legislation to stop people being victimised for standing up for their own health and safety. But it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Can an employer sack someone if they refuse to work in a workplace that's unsafe? The answer is yes, because if they sack you, you've sacked you. The fact that we might win an employment tribunal in 18 months' time is not really the point. For union reps, for union safety reps, I think we should be quoting the employment section 44 of the ERA, but not to do it individually. This is about doing things collectively, because if one person stands up and says it, to be honest, you'll be a martyr. If the employer wants to go for people, they'll get rid of that one person who makes a fuss. As I said, they might lose an employment tribunal in the future, but what we do is, if we all do it together, they're not going to sack all of us. And what section 44 becomes is like a comfort blanket. Any union safety rep who's cute enough should be able to use section 44 to go to your members, in the same way as you should be able to use risk assessments to go to your members and say, look, this is what's meant to happen. If we don't think it's safe, we've got a legal right in the law to withdraw ourselves from that particular workplace, and they can't discipline us. They shouldn't be disciplining us for it. If you get people to do it as a group, you're much more likely to win than if you do it individually. I did some stuff on one of the union reps I work with anyway. I told a story about Wembley Stadium. Okay, when they were building Wembley Stadium, it was a baking hot summer, and temperatures on pitch level were absolutely boiling, and people were literally passing out. It was so hot when they were building it, and the workers there asked that the companies put in more water points so that we could hydrate better. And the company said, no, we don't need to, because there's no law saying we have to. We've got water in other places. You can walk to where the water is. They called the health and safety executive in, and the inspector who came down, his name's Simon Sapper. He also happened to be the chair of the prospect branch for the health and safety inspectors as well. And Simon said to the union reps there, look, there's nothing in the law that they've broken. As a health and safety inspector, I cannot tell them and instruct them to put that water in because they're not breaking any law. But he said, you know, taking my inspector's hat off, but talking to you as a union rep, if you can collectively, as a group of workers, decide that you think this is unsafe, then you could use Section 44, and then we'll see how, it's all about power. We'll see how the power balance changes. And what happened? The inspector walked off the job. Within an hour of them walking off the job, the union got everyone in the canteen and said, if you think it's unsafe, we've got this right not to have to go out there in that baking hot heat. And basically, 200 workers sat in the canteen in the middle of building Wembley Stadium, and there was no production on that job. They weren't going on strike because they weren't refusing to work. They were just not prepared to work in the unsafe conditions. So we don't have to ballot for industrial action. There's no question about unofficial industrial action. Originally, when I asked for the water, the employer said, oh, it's not reasonably practicable, it's too expensive, we don't have to do it. When there's 200 workers and there's no sitting in the canteen, there's no production, suddenly it was very reasonably practicable, and literally within a few hours there was water stuff all over the place with water coolers like they have in the offices. It's not, yes, we should quote the law, but we should quote the law in order to mobilise our members, not to think that we're going to win a tribunal in 2 years' time. Right, someone else can do it now. Off you go.
Thanks, Dave. It's an important message there about relying on ourselves and our collective struggle, always above and before the law. Mo, can I come to you on either whether you want to talk about Section 44 or risk assessments?
Sorry?
Is there anything on those questions from before around risk assessments or Section 44 that you want to come in on?
No. I was just saying, in terms of we were educating members Section 44 in the buses for the first time. I'm just saying that the workers found out about Section 44. It was a very moving thing to equip members with information and stuff. So I think there was articles from TUC and also Unite, which was good at that time, and it was crucial that we educated our members regarding these things.
There's a couple of comments here. Aaron says, I explained Section 44 to our members, and in front of management, members of the NEU. They've been surprisingly pliant in their health and safety provision ever since. And John said, we use Section 44 in our workplace, and the unsafe vehicles were taken off the road until they were made COVID safe. So even if it's just a threat sometimes, it gets the goods. Ameen, is there anything you want to come in on? It'd be helpful if you've got any advice as well in terms of assessments for particularly vulnerable colleagues.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that. Look, I think the same principles apply to what Dave talked about, collective action around Section 44. Although it's written as an individual piece of legislation to protect individual workers, the strength comes about you challenging something collectively within that, not as individuals. So, look, I get no marks out of 10 for this, but the reason why there's disproportionate black deaths due to COVID is called racism. It's got nothing to do with biology, okay? I don't need a degree to tell you that, okay? That's just common sense, okay? Black workers are placed in more vulnerable workplaces They're less likely to complain about their situation they're in. They're more likely to not ask for PPE and other things. And therefore, that's why more of them have been dying in higher numbers. It's been there. Racial discrimination was there before COVID. It's just been more pronounced because of COVID. Now, this won't shock you either. Racism is not a black person's issue, okay? We suffer from it, but the solution and the responsibility for it doesn't lie with ourselves, okay? It lies with the workforce as a whole. So our duty is to explain to all members about why they need to oppose racism, why it's a collective issue that they all need to support their black workers in the workplace to have a collective response to make sure they're safe. It isn't good enough to say, well, and again, you know, amount of times I kick my TV in when they say that person died due to underlying health conditions. Come on now, what they're really saying is that person's dying because they've got health conditions related to their working environment, poor environment they live in the society in, that they're open to pollution, they're open to deprivation, and that's why they've got poor health. It's almost like legitimising killing working class people. Well, the excuse is somehow they've got an underlying health condition. What does that mean to anyone? So, look, obviously, there is a duty that needs to be performed, but there is also a duty at a service level in terms of any risk assessment. You know, if you've got a number of BAME workers or black workers in your workforce, if you've got a number of people that have vulnerable health conditions, then the management needs to look at that collectively rather than saying it's those individuals' issues or problems to deal with. It needs to look at how it provides that service itself and how it protects those workers collectively. And then, yeah, you know, there should also be a process where they look at those individuals. But I wouldn't want to rely on individual risks. I would demand it for anyone that's vulnerable or anyone that's black at the moment, that the individual risk assessment takes place. But ultimately, you know, you need to rely on the strength of you and your colleagues to say what you believe is what's safe and what it isn't safe. Again, you have to go back to that collective action of you, all of you. And when you put that demand to management as a collective, more often than not, they've had to listen. They've had to listen to the voice of the people that do the job and do the work. So, you know, have some confidence in yourself and put that demand back on management to deal with these issues collectively. The solution to inequality in our lives, whatever forms of discrimination we face now, if anything we learn from the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's an injury to one, it's an injury to all. We need to stand together if we want to fight against injustice and discrimination. We need to apply the same principles to health and safety at work.
Thank you, Ameen. A lot of people saying well said. Thanks for that. Very powerfully put. I think it's really important to make that link as well between the impact this is having on black workers and the Black Lives Matter movement, because as you say, the coronavirus doesn't discriminate based on race, but our capitalist economy does, and overwhelmingly black people who are put in those roles that are more exposed to the virus, not only coronavirus, but all sorts of other hazards and including low pay as well. We've only got a few more minutes, so I just wanted to quickly put to you guys, if you can answer within like sort of 10 seconds. We've got two questions. One's optimistic and one's pessimistic, I would say. Optimism comes from Simon. COVID has demystified health and safety by making it everyone's concern on an everyday basis. Unions have played a blinder in protecting members and setting the terms of the debate. How can we make this shift in the balance of industrial power last longer than COVID? And then Tracy says, what do you have as predictions about what will happen action-wise, given how the situation isn't easing and is getting worse with regard to people being exposed to the virus? I'm going to take you in the reverse order. So, Ameen, if I can come to you first with a really quick, sharp answer.
Right. Well, look, there's going to have to be a social reckoning for all the money that Rishi Sunak's spending, keeping the capitalist class going. And it's going to be who pays for that and on what terms. Is it going to be at the expense of our health and well-being, our jobs, our pay, our services, or are we going to make them pay for it? So it's going to be as simple as that, I think, and that reckoning is coming soon. It's not long in the offing, and we're going to have to be able to organise and defend ourselves.
Thanks, Ameen. And Mo, how can we make this shift in balance industrial power last longer beyond the pandemic?
I think what I've definitely learned from London buses is we have only one health and safety reps per bus depot. We can have 600 workers and one health and safety rep. And that usually is the garage rep. I think we can inspire more workers to be health and safety reps, demand that we review our facilities agreements and ensure there's more health and safety reps available in the workplaces. There are lots of workers that are not unionized. We can go from cleaners on the buses are unionized at the moment. We need to go in there and make sure that they have recognition agreement, health and safety reps available, and that they're collectively putting forward demands to their employers, what they need to carry out their job safely.
Thanks, Mo. And to you, Dave, things are getting worse, not better. What kind of action do we need to see in the next few weeks and months? You're still muted, mate.
First time ever that I've been muted. And my managers have been trying to do that for years. For both questions, I think the answer's the same, really. Exactly as Ameen said, what's going to happen, not in the next couple of weeks, but in the next 18 months, is we're seeing it already. You know, whether we like it or not, we live under capitalism. There will be redundancies. The employers aren't building projects or running buses or you know, delivering social care just because it's a good thing. They're doing it to make money. And there will, you know, whether we like it or not, under the capitalist system, there will be redundancies. There will be job cuts. The employers are going to try and make big pay cuts. You've seen it with British Airways. You've seen it with some of the, you know, prestige employers are absolutely using the pandemic as a way of driving down terms and conditions. Of course, and I'll say this at the end as well as at the beginning, of course, we would love to work together with employers and actually overcome these things. And we don't have to sort of, you know, who doesn't want to work together and collaboratively to improve health and safety and protect our members' terms and conditions. But given the economic climate and the government we've got, I think there's big industrial battles coming. And the way we protect health and safety is to do it by mobilising our members. Exactly as Ameen said, exactly as Mo said. It's not about publicity stunts. It's about using leverage. It's about getting our members in together to do things collectively. And I think any strategy that thinks that we can appeal to the better nature of British Airways and that will stop the redundancies is slightly missing the point. You know, I think we need to go back to, we need to mobilise on health and safety, but I think strategically the entire trade union movement needs to look at itself and think perhaps we need to mobilise to protect pay and mobilise to protect jobs as well. And that might not be how we've been doing it in the recent past. We might need to look back further in the distance for that and relearn the lessons that we did when the union movement was stronger. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thanks to Mo and Ameen as well. Thanks everyone that's tuned in this afternoon. I think it's been a really helpful and inspiring session. I'm just going to finish now by showing a video that Dave sent over to see you all out. Look after yourselves, comrades. There's a couple more sessions that relate to health and safety over the next couple of days. Tomorrow we've got organising on mental health, and on Saturday we've got women, health and safety and organising, where I'll be hearing from some fantastic women union health and safety reps. You can find all the sessions on the TUC's Organising 2020 page. Take care, and here's the video.
Work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing should be actively encouraged to go to work.
What I don't understand is why my daddy has to work on a construction site, working in close contact with other people. Not a doctor or a nurse saving lives. He's not an essential worker doing essential work.
On the exact same day that the government is forcing construction workers back onto unsafe building sites, the Office of National Statistics has produced figures saying that 3 times more construction workers have died from coronavirus than healthcare professionals.
These body bags are a symbol of how the responsibility has slipped from Boris Johnson's desk onto the shoulders of men with hard hats on construction sites.
We have too many big companies, especially putting profit before lives. That's a breach of their statutory duty of care. Non-essential work such as High Speed 2 is carrying on apace.
The government, the HSE and Public Health England must know that on site and as they travel to and from work, construction workers are exposed to and are unwitting carriers of the coronavirus. In my view, this is criminal negligence, it's manslaughter, it's social murder.
Construction is a notoriously risky business. Accidents happen all the time. When accidents happening now just place increased strain on an already overstretched NHS.
There will be no cliff edge to the furlough scheme. I'm working as we speak to figure out the most effective way to wind down the scheme and ease people back into work. We want to get people back to work, get our economy fired up again.
If the government wants to protect public health, it needs to pay construction workers to stay at home.
Self-employed and agency workers should be paid as well. Nobody should be left in poverty.
We need to get our voice heard. We need to protest, organising collectively to get our message across.
Because we're at the bottom of the pile, they send us to work. I'm not a lab rat, I'm a human being.
My name is Simon Hester. For 18 years, I was an inspector with the Health and Safety Executive under Section 7 of the Health and Safety at Work Act and Section 44 of the Employment Rights Act of 1996. You have the legal right to remove yourself from the workplace if you feel that your health and safety is put at risk, including by the virus.
If you are working on a site, ask for your risk assessment, your COVID-19 risk assessment.
I'm scared my daddy will bring the virus home, scared he will be ill, scared he will make my mummy, my brother ill too.
Don't go in a site and get this fucking thing that's going to kill you and kill your family. Please, please don't do it.
Remember the dead, fight for the living!
My daddy is very important to us.
Solidarity, comrades.